All right, we're going to kick things off with a short intro video made by one of our panelists, Malin Donka. Excellent. Thank you so much, Malin, for that. I love how you put that together. So just a quick tech check. Did that come through all right for you folks? Excellent. Yes, that's what we're looking for. Well, welcome everyone to Charging into the Future. Let's get charged up about electric vehicles. So my name is Carrie Ziegler, and I'm going to be your moderator this evening. I'm really excited you're all here with us tonight. And before we jump in too much, I just want to touch base a little bit on a few technical issues because, oh my gosh, Zoom, right? Whether it's your first time on Zoom or your 100th, it seems like there's always something that comes up. Honestly, today my internet was like totally behaving weird and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to be here tonight. So I'm really glad this is all working out. If you are experiencing any tech problems, I'd ask you to chat with Thad Kurtz. He is on the panel here. Thad, do you want to say hi real quick? He's waving.
Hello.
So if you don't,
here to help.
That sounds great. If you don't know how to chat, I'm going to stop this share really quick because I want you to be able to see your screen a little bit better. The chat button, if you're on a computer or a laptop, is at the bottom of your screen, kind of right in the middle. It has a little bubble like you see in cartoons, and it says chat, and you can just click on that, and you should be able to find Thad's name there to chat to. So that should be that. And then also I'm going to suggest that, oh, for one thing, if you're really having problems, the best thing to do is to just leave and then come back. Like if you just can't get any audio or video to work out, just leave the meeting and then rejoin. That often will be the best thing to fix the problem. Speaking of views, the best view I think you're gonna have is in speaker view. There's a lot of us here, right? There's over 50 people in this meeting right now. And so we're all in these little tiny itty bitty squares and we have 8 different people to talk with you tonight. And so if you're able to use the speaker view, that's a great way to do it. On the top of your Zoom screen, there's a couple of options. One is speaker view, and that allows you to see the person who's talking and everybody else is in a little tiny box. Or you can do the gallery view, which is the little squares up there. If you click that one, everybody's in a little square, which is fun, but it's hard to really see the presenter. So I'm going to suggest speaker view for this while we're going through this. If I wanted to let you know too that we are recording, and so if you do not want to be in the recording, you can just turn your camera off, and the camera off button is in the bottom left-hand corner. It looks like a little camera icon. You can just click that button and it will stop your video. The rest of the video will keep playing. That's also can be helpful if you're having connectivity issues. If you turn your own camera off, that can often help you to see what other people are doing better. So just a little tip there. Let's see here. What else did I want to tell you about technical wise? If you have any questions, go ahead and type those into the chat box. I would suggest sending them out to everybody. That way we can kind of start a conversation and build on questions from each other. So go ahead and use that chat box for questions. We will have the Q&A at the end of the experience, so that we'll save those for later. And you may have noticed that unless you're a panelist, you are on mute. You don't have the opportunity to unmute yourself, and that is specifically because with so many people, it's really easy to get distracted. And with that speaker view, if somebody is presenting and then another person has audio coming in, Zoom will actually redirect your picture to that other person, and so it can be pretty distracting. We can take that off later during the Q&A so you can have a little more conversation. All right, this webinar is sponsored by, of course, the Thurston Climate Action Team. And if you're not familiar with TCATs, they're a local nonprofit that's really all about bringing our community together to reduce climate disruption. creating a healthy, just future for all of us. And I'm really grateful to be working with them. They're doing awesome work in this community. The webinar itself is put on by, excuse me, by the Transportation Action Group. And our goal is to help lower carbon emissions in Thurston County in the transportation sector. And speaking of the transportation sector and emissions, transportation is actually a huge part of our emissions in Thurston County. And so when it comes to reducing our emissions in the transportation sector, we got to look at a lot of different things, including things like long-term urban planning of 20-minute or walkable neighborhoods, and putting in infrastructure to help people get out of their cars and onto bikes, into buses, and walking. And that's going to help us to reach the really ambitious goals that are set out in the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And if you're not familiar with that, that process has been going on for quite a while, the creation of this plan, which will essentially be a roadmap for our county to help us to lay out how to get to 85% reduction of greenhouse gases by, from our 2015 levels by the year 2050. So it's very ambitious. So fortunately, there's a lot of great things we can do. And thank you, Samada, for putting the link to the climate mitigation plan in the chat box. So even as we re-envision our neighborhoods and start walking and biking more, many of us are going to continue to be dependent on our cars. And so if you do drive a car, switching from a gas vehicle to an electric vehicle, or EV for short, is really probably the single most largest change you can make to reduce your own climate emissions. So that's why the Transportation Action Group decided to focus on EVs and to create this webinar. So, oh, by the way, the Transportation Action Group is actually a lot of fun. I know it doesn't maybe sound all that sexy, but it's a really fun group. And I would totally love it if any of you want to join us for a meeting. You should just drop me an email at the end of this and I'll let you know about our next meeting, which happens to be this Friday at 1:15. So come on and join that if you would like. All right, full disclosure, I do not own an electric vehicle and I do drive a car. It's obvious, like, not everybody can just go out and buy an electric vehicle today. We're at different places financially and we have lots of different things going on. But what we can do today is to learn more and gear ourselves up so that when we are ready to buy that next car, we're ready to make the transition from gas to electric. And so I'm really excited and I'm hoping that this webinar will help all of us, myself included, get that much closer to making that transition. All right, so we have 8 actual EV owners with us tonight who are going to share their experiences of buying, owning, and having electric vehicles. They all live right here in Thurston County, and I'm really excited for that. Before we jump into that, I'm going to make sure there's nothing too important I need to look at in the chat box. I think we'll just not worry about that too much. And I'm going to play a short video by Ed Erickson. So give me just a moment to pop this up here. This video is going to explore some of the myths that we often hear about electric vehicles. Now, just FYI, the video could be a little bit choppy. It's just the nature of video conferencing right now, but I think you'll get the picture. So let's go ahead and play this video.
Wow, that's just a beautiful new car. It's a new electric car, isn't it? Yeah. Is this the first car you ever drove? Wow.
Well, it must be easy to learn to drive because all of those electric cars have autopilot.
Well, that's a Fiat electric car.
Well, I heard that EVs have greenhouse gas emissions too. charging stations are confusing. There's so many different attachments, different connections, and it costs to charge. It's as much to charge as it is to buy gas. Well, EVs are basically golf carts. It's bad when they crash into a real car. So you're planning a long trip? Well, you're not going to get very far in an electric car because they just don't have any range.
Hey, that's an expensive car, isn't it?
You might get electrocuted when you drive through a puddle.
That's interesting.
Okay, thank you, Ed, for that. I hope Ed was able to join the meeting. I think he was having trouble before, but love that video. That's awesome. Okay, so we are ready to get started. The plan here is we're going to have our panelists each have a chance to tell us their story, and then we'll have a little lightning round of Q&A based on if we didn't get all the myths cleared up. We're going to make sure we get those myths cleared up. And after that, we'll have time for audience Q&A. So get your questions down. If you don't put them in the chat box, jot them down for later, and we'll get going from there. All right, our first panelist is Malin Donka, the creator of that lovely first intro video that we had. Now, Malin drives her family's shared 2018 Nissan Leaf. And Malin, I heard that you actually learned how to drive on an electric vehicle. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did. So I learned how to drive on the electric vehicle. I'm 17 years old, so I've been driving it for about a year and a half. So I completely learned how to drive in it, and for a very, very short period of time, I thought that driving all cars were like driving electric cars, which I learned very quickly wasn't true. And so two things in particular about the car I learned to drive in. The first thing is that we have one pedal braking. So I don't know if this feature comes in all of them, but it comes in a lot of them. And this makes it so that the car can go and stop in the same pedal. And also the acceleration. On our EV, the acceleration is very fast, and at least compared to other cars that I've driven. So it's very smooth and it's very nice. So before I started doing drives at my driver's school, I practiced with my parents driving our car. And so the first time that I actually did have to go drive in a normal gas-powered car with the official instructor, I scared them a little bit just by accelerating a little too fast because I thought it was super smooth, just like the EV. And so going back between the electric cars and the gas cars, I kind of just had to think, does this car brake on its own, or do I need to really press the brake, or how does the acceleration compare to the others? Because between the EVs and the other cars, they definitely have their differences. And so I ended up taking my official driver's test in our electric car, and it was the first time that the person who was scoring me had ever ridden in an EV as well. And she complimented me on how smoothly it ran and how quiet it was, and I think she was very impressed with the way it worked as well. And so it might just be the way that I learned to drive, but I really like driving it. I think it's super easy to charge, and it's just in general a really nice car, and it feels good to drive in. So in my family, we have 5 people and 3 cars, which means that we do a lot of juggling so that the cars are being used for their best purpose. So besides the EV, which happens to be named Flint, which is short for the Flintstone Mobile, we own a hybrid Prius and an old Nissan, which we typically call the family car. So if anyone ends up going far distances, they usually take the Prius just to be safe. But Flint can be used for smaller distances as well as trips into and out of town. On a full charge, we can take it up to Gig Harbor or to the SeaTac airport, or we can just take it around town and it can last 2 to 3 days before we have to charge it again. So the family car is our least reliable car just because it's pretty old, but we use that as kind of a last resort if the other cars are taken or it's environmentally better for someone else to take Flint. So that's kind of just how we juggle the cars. We're always thinking about how we might be able to use Flint so that we can minimize the use of our gas cars. And we'll also just discuss ways that we can put 2 errands into one, or drop and pick people up so that we can use that single car. So like I said before, I love driving the electric car. It's very smooth, and from a young person's perspective, I think it's very classy and pretty fun to drive. So, with advancements in electric vehicle technology, by the time that I might be buying or owning a car, EVs are definitely something that I would look into getting. Yeah, that's about it.
Great. Thank you so much, Maylin. It's such a different world to be able to learn to drive in an EV, and then to be able to teach your driving test person about EVs. That's awesome.
Definitely, yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Amy Hargrove. And Amy drives a 2014 Nissan Leaf. So another Leaf on the panel here. Amy, did you actually buy that car used? That feels nerve-wracking to me to buy a used EV. I don't know.
Hi, Carrie. We did actually buy this that 2014 Nissan here from Cleveland, but we actually used EV. It was a little nerve-wracking when we started first thinking about buying a used EV. But, we did some research. I talked to a lot of friends that have owned EVs, that had previously owned EVs even. And we were a little concerned about the battery and how fast that would decline. But everybody that I've talked to had theirs for years. And it seemed like it did go down a little bit every couple of years, but not like you're going to totally lose your battery. Our EV gets 85 miles on a charge. And, that also depends on how much you use the heater and the cooler and that kind of stuff. But overall, we can make all the trips that we need to. As a family of 4, it was kind of that extra vehicle that we needed to get because we had 2 new drivers in our family this year. And that's the other reason we bought used, because we've got a new college student this year, plus insurance rates going up because of 2 new teen drivers. So having that used car with half the price, or less than probably half the price of the new EVs out there, it just really worked for our family. It drives great. It met all of our requirements. We wanted something that was efficient, something that could get me to and from work, something that was newer than our 16-year-old car, which is the other newest car we own. I wanted something I could hook my phone into, which I know you can get now outside of an EV. But once Cleve let us drive that car for about a week before we decided to buy it. And that was really great because we were able to drive that car, and I learned that it had a heated steering wheel, and I will never own another car without a heated steering wheel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. Oh my gosh, a heated steering wheel? I didn't even know that was a thing. My car.
It's the best thing ever.
It sounds like you had a great experience buying that car.
We did.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Next up, we have Cleve Pinnix.
All right.
And Cleve drives a 2019 Kia Niro. So what do you think, Cleve? Does this car actually meet your driving needs, or do you find yourself worried about not getting where you need to go?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Carrie. Because our family's first EV, this is actually our second try at this. Our family's first one was a 2014 Nissan Leaf, which we bought used. We owned 2 cars back then, and we soon found that the Leaf, with its 80-mile range, met our local driving needs. So we started to use our conventional car much less. The Leaf did the job. Then last autumn, we took the plunge. We sold both our cars, and we bought this Kia Niro. It has a range of over 200 miles on a charge. It's quick, it's quiet, it's comfortable. The thing is a joy to drive, and it's loaded with safety features. It takes us to Seattle for city trips. It carries me up rough gravel roads to hiking trails. It has good cargo capacity. I gotta tell you, I love this car. And I'm with Amy. The heated steering wheels rock in the Olympia winter. But what we also learned, what I think is important for anybody thinking about buying an EV, is that every new or potential EV owner has a hurdle to overcome, the dreaded range anxiety. We're all used to stopping by the gas station, right? But what about an all-electric vehicle? Is it going to leave me stranded out on some dark road at night? Owning an EV requires some rewiring of our brains. We need to change the way we think about how we use our vehicles. What are our actual driving needs? Not some extreme case where we suddenly take off for a 1,000-mile journey. Our experience taught us that practically all our driving is short to medium range, and I'll bet yours is too. One thing that shift in thinking does require is a little bit of planning. Where do we want to go that EV is going to take us tomorrow? If the battery is partly discharged and it's going to be a longer trip, then simply plug it in tonight and drive with confidence the next day. Get used to the idea of a little forethought, and that nasty range anxiety just melts away. Sure, there's going to be times we might want to take a longer trip in the EV. There's a rapidly growing network of fast charging stations across the country, capable of recharging our Niro while we eat lunch. Once again, a little planning ahead, rewiring the way we think about this will let us travel long distance with confidence. We really enjoy the benefits of an EV. Much lower cost for fuel, about 1/3 that of a gas vehicle. Much lower maintenance. An EV is reliable in the same way modern appliances are reliable. It's solid state electronics with a tiny fraction of the moving parts of a gasoline vehicle. Say goodbye to oil changes and tune-ups and stopping at the gas station. But the biggest benefit from switching to an EV is for the planet. Right now, EVs contribute far less of the carbon pollution that is causing the climate crisis. Right now, we can be a part of making a serious difference by changing what we drive. Don't let range anxiety slow you down. Be a part of the change our planet needs. Thanks for considering EVs.
Thanks a lot, Cleve. I feel you really just put into perspective what I feel like some of my things have been like, oh, what if I can't get to where I need to go, you know? But it makes a lot of sense. Just, you know, it's just learning a new system, right? And
takes that rewiring. It does.
Yeah, and we can learn all kinds of things. We can do all sorts of hard things, right? And this is probably one of the less hard things we can do.
And it's got the heated steering wheel.
That too, yes.
Right.
Thanks so much, Cleve.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Jeff Johnson. Let me grab a picture of Jeff's car here. There's Jeff and his 2019 Hyundai Kona. Now, Jeff, speaking of range anxiety, Jeff took his car all the way to California and back. I don't know how he did it. Let's find out.
Okay, well, thanks, Carrie, and good evening, everybody. Yes, in fact, we did drive our Kona all the way to the San Francisco Bay Area last December, and no, luckily, we did not get stuck along the way. It was actually a very smooth trip, but I must say that when my wife suggested that we take the Kona to San Francisco, I was a bit skeptical. But the more we looked into it and saw how many charging stations there actually are out there, I realized that it wasn't really going to be that difficult. A lot of people, you know, they think about EVs as being only good for short distances around town. But if you have an EV with a range of, you know, upwards of 200 miles or so, long road trips are definitely doable. And again, these days, many of the new EVs, I'd say probably most of them, have range of over 200 miles. Our Kona has a range of about 260 miles. So how did we approach the trip? Well, we planned it out, but really the planning wasn't that much different than other road trips that we've planned. This time we just planned around where we would stop for a charge rather than what we wanted to see along the way. And luckily, there are lots of tools available for planning your trips. There are websites, there are apps for your phone, and even the software in the car tells you exactly where the charging stations are and will navigate you right to them. So the trip was a great way to learn the ins and outs of charging away from home. Some of the key things that I'll mention that we learned are, as a couple of the other panelists have mentioned, you need to really pay attention to the things that impact your range. Things like weather. Your battery, you're not going to have the range in cold weather that you do in warm weather. If it's raining, if it's snowing, if you're running your heat or your defroster, that's going to eat into your range somewhat. Also, vehicle speed is a factor. Going 70 miles an hour, you won't have the same range that you do going 60 miles an hour. And then certainly the terrain. If you're going up and over mountain passes, that will eat into your range. You need to plan ahead. We learned firsthand that it's important to have a backup charging station so that in case the original charger that you're going for is offline or otherwise unavailable. And another important thing is that not all chargers and not all charging networks are created equal. And so there are different types of connections. There are different charging speeds and different prices at the different charging networks. So none of this is all that complicated, but you just have to educate yourself. The trip did take a little extra time. What would have been about a day and a half in a gasoline vehicle was closer to 2 full days. But we didn't think actually that was a bad thing. It was a more relaxed trip, and we stopped and saw some things that we wouldn't otherwise have seen along the way. I just want to mention that unfortunately my story ends on a sad note, and Carrie, I don't know if you were going to show that picture or not, but a few weeks ago I was rear-ended in the car and the car was totaled. So I just wanted to say I was hit hard enough that the vehicle was totaled, but I was absolutely fine, not even a sore neck. So in case you're wondering, again, are EVs safe? Are they solid vehicles? Yes, indeed they are. They have to pass the same safety standards as conventional vehicles. And unfortunately, I can now say from experience that, that the Hyundai Kona, at least, is a very solid vehicle. We absolutely love the Kona, and we are planning on going out and getting another one. And I'll just end by saying that, yeah, actually, as Samara put in the chat, I wrote an article for the newsletter back in July, and so there's a lot more detail about our trip that I included in the newsletter article. So thanks, and with that, I'll hand it over to the next panelist.
Thanks excuse me. Thanks so much, Jeff. And I'm so glad that nobody got hurt in that accident. But it does really show, you know, I mean, you hear that cars, these EVs are like little tin cans, but it seems like that held up pretty well.
It did. It did.
Also pretty cool. I didn't realize that the EV can actually tell you where to go to get to the next charging station. So that's pretty cool. It's built-in software like that. Okay, our next presenter is Pat Home. Pat drives a 2016 Fiat 500 EV. All right, Pat, I keep hearing that EVs are just too expensive. What do you think about that? Are they pretty expensive to drive?
No, not at all. It's a lot cheaper than a gasoline car. It costs about a third of what it would cost to drive a gasoline car, because electricity is pretty cheap in Washington State. It's about 10 cents kilowatt hour, and I've never spent more than $10 a month on charging my EV. And I bought my used 2016 Fiat 500e about a year and a half ago for about $9,000. And then I did end up paying $1,000 in Washington sales tax. And now you don't have to pay for the sales tax any longer. You just pay for the, a used car saves money because you don't have to pay a sales tax any longer. And my car had about 30,000 miles on it. and I found it online. And I was giving my old car to my granddaughter. It was '96 Camry, and I decided it would be good to buy an electric car. So I looked online and I found a little mom and pop place called Full Throttle that's just on the way on just off I-5 on 512, and it's about 20 minutes to get there. I decided I really liked the picture of the car, and so my partner and I went and tried it out, and it was fine. He's almost 6 foot tall, and he fit in it beautifully. And you can put 4 people in it, 4 adults even. But I mean, it's more comfortable for the 2 that are in the driver and passenger side. And let's see. So I checked online just recently to see if he had additional Fiats there at this Full Throttle place. It's just a little mom and pop used car place. And he's got about 6 right now, and they're about $9,000. And somebody just asked if I had an electric bike. I also have an electric bike, which I just love. Every old person should have an electric bike with all the hills that are around us. And the wonderful part about the electric car is when you go down a hill, you actually, put miles back on it. So if you've got a lot of hills to go down, of course, going up takes more. But because an electric car only has 20 moving parts, whereas a gasoline engine has 2,000 moving parts, the repairs are a lot less expensive also. You just have to basically replace tires, brakes, and the battery, but like many people have said, they've never had to replace the battery. And battery prices have gone down 90% in the last 10 years. And also, electric motors are more efficient than gas motors. A gas motor gets about 30% efficiency. It's about 30% efficient on average, whereas an electric motor is over 90% efficient in almost all cases. So I just love this little car, and it's got a 90-mile range, and we just drive mostly around town. We just have 1 car and 2 electric bikes. So we either take the bikes or the car. And we frequently take my granddaughter, and she's, 17, so she's, the size of an adult anyway. And, we're fine. And so I just love driving it. And also the navigation panel on the front does tell you, where the charging stations are. And I just have a little 120, regular outlet that I plug it into. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pat. And thanks for sneaking in a bit about your electric bike too.
Okay, thanks. Somebody asked the question.
I love how excited you are about that car. It is such a cute car.
And, everybody loves it.
Right? All right, next up we have Matthew Murray. Matt is the owner of a 2014 BMW i3 Pure Electric. Pat, how did you end up owning this car?
It was really, it was kind of purchased almost by accident. It was kind of a whimsical purchase. It wasn't because I was interested in electric cars at all at the time. It was I had a teenage son at the time. He's actually still a teenage son, and he's still my son. He's now 18 though, and he was just very interested in electric cars and the technology behind them, the engineering behind them. And I think BMW in particular, from a visit to Germany, we were on a vacation and went to that museum for him that was there where they're made. And so he was somebody that was just very excited about it, but I was not interested at all simply because of the price tag. So he was looking at things like Teslas and these cars that were, $60,000 and $80,000. And so I just told him, I really wasn't interested. I previously was driving a Prius. And I really did like that for just the efficiency and low emissions. It was a great car, but that was in an accident and was totaled. So I started looking for a new vehicle, and he decided to help me. And so I gave him the requirements, which was I wanted something with under 20,000 miles, and I didn't want to pay more than $25,000. And the very next day, we were headed to Portland, and he said, hey, I found a couple of cars for us to look at, and they meet your requirements. And he handed me a piece of paper, and they were 3 miles from where we were going in Portland, and they were both BMW i3s. The one that you just saw, I was able to purchase with 8,000 miles on it for $22,000. So they was, used was an incredible price. And so I said, I mean, it was a great find. So we went to look at them together, and I was not anticipating purchasing it, but it was such a cool car. It just looked a little bit unusual. The interior was neat. It's made from almost 80% entirely recycled materials. So it had just some interesting materials inside. And just a lot of technology that was fun. And if you're used to driving a Prius, you're used to seeing a screen that shows you a lot of information about how you're driving. And this car did a really wonderful job of that. And it's just turned out to be something that I'm not a car person. I really don't care what my car looks like or what type it is. I just need to go someplace. And this car was the first car that I've had that was actually really enjoyable to drive, just because of the non-combustion engine and the way it accelerates and so on. So, I've had it now for about 3 years, and I've not had a single repair or mechanical issue with it. As others have said, it's very simple in that respect. It's had a couple of software updates. That's been about the only thing that it's needed. And at this point, I can't imagine not having an electric car. I think as technology improves, and as you've seen from some of the other vehicles and products today, it just year after year seems to get better and better. So do our choices, and the costs as well are coming down greatly. So if you haven't driven one, I would just really recommend test driving one. You'll get hooked.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Matt. I love how your son was the instigator there. That's great. All right, next up we have Tom Middleton and Chris Newmiller, and they are going to tell us a little bit about their evolving process of buying an EV and how they ended up with a 2020 Chevy Bolt.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks. I guess I'll lead off the conversation, and I'll have Chris jump in kind of near the middle of the end. I'll contrast Matt. I'm a car guy through and through. I mean, if it had an engine and wheels, that was my thing. I was in there, and I was all about it. Never really thought about electric cars. It was interesting. Electric car back in the day was the commuter car, or some hobbyists, handmade rig with lead acid batteries that had a 30-mile range. And so it really didn't interest me. That all changed when I had a car club event. We had an invite to the Tesla showroom downtown Seattle. This is, about 10 years ago. And we went down and checked out the Tesla Roadster, and they showed us the battery packs and told us about the range. And I was like, wow, this is a game changer. This is huge. Fast forward a couple of years, the Tesla comes out with the Model S, and I'm just, we're jazzed. I've got friends that are in cars, and we're thinking like, these electric cars are great. Teslas are awesome, but man, are they expensive. But in the meantime, I kept looking around, kept trying to figure out a way to get into one of these things or do something. And I got it. I got an email from BMW that said they were loaning out for a weekend a BMW i3. And I thought, like, well, let's see what this is all about. It could be a sales call, whatever. Went in, and they gave us the i3 for a 4-day weekend, essentially, no strings attached. And so we drove that for the weekend. We drove it up to Seattle and had a blast with it. And we just loved the acceleration. I just loved the electric car in general. So, that cemented in my mind. I said we had to get an electric car.
So yeah, so we've had experience with electric cars through work. We both work at Department of Ecology, and they've really increased their fleet of cars, and so we've driven them at work. And one of them was the Bolt, and it's really a surprisingly amazing car. It's quick, it's roomy, it looks okay. So we ended up looking at a bunch of different cars, but settled on a Bolt. We actually did a lease to try it out for 3 years to see how we liked it and see how, waiting for the technology to change in 3 years. It was a really great price, and it's a great little car. I never thought I'd own a Chevy because in my previous life, I was a Ford person. And then I was a Nissan person. I drove a 1999 Nissan Pathfinder for 21 years, 15 miles per gallon, $50 to fill up. Now it costs barely anything to charge our car, just a few dollars. And it's fun to drive, and you kind of get into increasing your range and making it a game. And it's really just a lot of fun, and just much better overall for the environment, even going beyond carbon and considering that we have gas stations on every corner, and almost every one of those is a cleanup at our department where we work, where gas escapes into the environment, and crashes of tankers and refineries and all of that. And an electric car has none of that associated with it. So our experience so far has been great. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've basically haven't even tried hard, and we're getting over 300 miles on our charge right now, which is pretty phenomenal considering the car is rated for 260. So we're really happy with it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both so much. I really appreciate, Chris, how you're mentioning all the other impacts of gas that, we might not even think about. That's really important to think about. And also, that was so awesome, the little cat tail going on. Wonderful. Oh, cute kitty. You're going to win the prize. Everybody's like, yes. All right, we have one more panelist tonight. Let me share her car, and I'd like everybody to welcome Susie Vanderberg, who's the owner of a 2018 Nissan Leaf, and she's pictured here with her grandson, AJ. Susie says that AJ's future is the reason that she bought this car. And you got to unmute yourself there, Susie. Yeah. You got to click the unmute button.
How's that?
There we go. Gotcha.
Okay. I did it earlier. It must have gone back. Anyway, good to see you. And yes, I did purchase a 2018 Nissan Leaf. In 2018, it was new. I would have preferred a used car. I wanted the 2015, but I needed more range. My grandson, AJ, lives in Bellevue, and I wanted to be able to drive to Bellevue and back without having to stop along the way to charge up. So with my 2018 Leaf, I can do that. And I actually just love this car. I love the comfort. I love the regenerative braking. It's such a cool thing to know how efficient that is. I love the fact that I can open up the hatchback and shove my 9-foot kayak in there and close it and not have to put it on top of the car. I love the fact that 3 of my solar panels make enough electricity for me to drive my car, so I call it a solar car. It's just a great car. But the real reason, like you said, the real reason I bought this car was so that someday, AJ's 10 now, my grandson, but someday he's going to be asking questions, and I want to be able to look him in the eye and say I did everything I could to help rein in this climate change catastrophe. It wasn't an easy decision for 2 reasons. Number one, this car is really high tech, I think, as most people have explained. The owner's manual is really fat, and you need to read it because it's a lot of new stuff about an EV, and that was pretty daunting for me. I'm not a big high-tech person. I like to keep my life simple. So that was a little bit difficult, a little bit of a barrier for me. But the other big thing was the price. It cost $32,000. And I know a lot of people say, well, that's really not that unusual for a new car nowadays. But for me, it was a big deal because I'm a retired educator. And, I have a good pension, and I have my own pot of savings for future emergencies. But $32,000 is a lot of money for me. So that was tough. But I got to thinking, you know, you have this savings, CDs or whatever, especially when you retire. And the whole idea is that that's for future security, right? Because you don't know what's going to come along, and it's sort of like a safety net. But I thought, what could be more threatening to future security than climate change? I mean, if I really think that's what that money's for, then for crying out loud, do something about it. So I did. I bought an electric car. And I feel good about the decision. And especially, you know, after this week of sitting home for a week because of the smoke, I kind of feel like it's not just about the future. I feel like the future is now. And I think all of us need to do whatever we can, whether you're going to be looking your grandkid in the eye or not. You know, we just need to look inside our hearts and minds and know that we all need to step up to the plate and do the best we can. So my closing message is, the time is now. The future is now. Go for it.
Thank you, Susie. You really brought it all right back around to what is important, right? It's the future of our kids, of our grandkids. And I've like totally got a tear going down my cheek right now because I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. And thank you for that heartfelt, you know, story about why you're doing what you're doing. I think that a lot of us can really relate to that. And I appreciate that so much. And a huge thank you to all of our panelists. It is so great to get a real world, you know, perspective on what it's like to buy, drive, own an electric vehicle, to kind of get some glimpses into what it takes to make it happen and all of that. So we're going to open it up to Q&A in just a minute, but first I got a few myths that I don't think we've touched on yet. So I'm going to bump these out there real quick, real lightning round of Mythbusters. All right. So let me ask Matthew. I hear people are concerned about getting electrocuted if they drive through a puddle or go through a car wash. What do you think about that?
Those two things are my favorite thing to do in the car, is drive through puddles and car washes. There's not a chance. I think people hear the word electricity and water, and we're so conditioned to that, but no manufacturer would make anything with that great of a liability. They're completely safe.
Thank you very much for clearing that up. All right, Tom and Chris, I wanted to ask you, particularly Tom, since you're a car guy, right? So new tech, it's like EVs are new. There's a lot that can go wrong, right?
Yeah, you'd think so, but you know, I've been, you know, neck deep in engine rebuilds, and you know, the number of parts are insane on a gasoline vehicle. Simply looking at it from an exhaust system, you know, replacing transmissions, transmission fluids, all the fluids that are involved, the cooling system, you know, which is just so small on an electric car compared to what is on a gas car. Just it's not even close. You know, I think Pat and Cleve even touched on that a bit, you know, about the number of parts. You know, a couple hundred parts versus 2,000 parts or more. So not at all.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I think it's something like, what, 20-ish parts to 2,000? Is that what I've been hearing?
Yeah, that's kind of the number I've seen tossed around. Yeah.
Uh-huh. That's amazing that there's that much of a difference in moving parts in the two types of vehicles.
People they tend to forget how complex their ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, are.
Right.
Because they're everywhere. That's just what people take as the norm.
We're used to taking it in for a tune-up and replacing parts all the time. Great.
Yeah, and just think of all those fluids dumping into the environment.
Right.
They don't come out of an electric car.
That's so true. All right, Jeff. A lot of people, one thing I hear is that the electric grid is dirty, so it's just as dirty as using gas, so why use electricity?
Well, in fact, there have been a lot of studies on this, and I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but actually a gasoline vehicle would have to get over 100 miles per gallon to have the same emissions as driving an EV in our area. So, and again, even hybrid vehicles don't come close to that. So no, EVs really are a lot better for the environment than conventional vehicles for emissions, but then for the leaking gasoline and the petroleum in the environment, for all the other reasons that folks have been talking about.
Excellent. And there's also some new state legislation out that is by the year 2045, the state of Washington will have a completely clean electric grid. Now I know that's a ways out, but they're going to be continuing to take steps to get there and cleaning it up more and more along the way. So I think it's only going to get better around here. Cleve, you want to tell us a little bit about charging? Because like, do I need to install some fancy charging apparatus if I get an EV?
Yeah, Carrie, that's a really interesting question. And I see in the chat box, there's been some discussion about that. Here's a simple way to think about it, friends. Any of these vehicles we've been talking about tonight, you can charge them up on a standard household 110, 120 outlet. And in fact, as far as I know, all these vehicles come standard with a charger cord that will do just that. So no problem. There is one thing, the newer vehicles that have longer range obviously have a lot bigger battery system. So for those vehicles, just for the time it takes to charge, it might be worth your while to do what I did, which is to install the 240 circuit. That lets you charge in a lot less time. But if you don't mind slower charging, 110 works just right. You don't need to spend another nickel and you're good to go.
So that's great. So I could start out with using my 120 volt, and then if I wanted a faster charge, I could put in the 220, which is like a standard dryer outlet. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a little different plug, but it's the same idea. Same kind of circuit. The electrical contractors know what they're doing with that. It's pretty simple kind of change if you want to do it. Here's a way to make it real. When we had the 2014 Leaf, what we found with that size battery system is that car would charge right up overnight on 120. When we got the Nero, it was going to take over 2 days for that to do on 120. So we put in the 240 circuit, and now we charge up fully overnight, and we're good to go.
Well, that clears that up. Thank you. And then, you know, this idea of these cars are still expensive, right? So is there anything out there to help us buy these cars? Jeff, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so when we bought actually both our plug-in hybrid, but also our full EV, one of the reasons why we bought the vehicles we did was because of the federal and state tax incentives. So there are federal tax incentives and state sales tax incentives as well. And so those depend upon whether you've got a new vehicle or a used vehicle. So won't go into the details, but that, I mean, on the Kona, that reduced the cost of the car by about $10,000. So that's pretty significant. And so that actually reduced, so the electric version was cheaper than the gasoline version.
Excellent. Well, that's great. I think, well, this is great. I think we should move on and to make sure we've got some questions from the audience laid out here. Let's see, I haven't had a chance to really look through all the chat function yet. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves. And if you have a question you'd like to ask, if you could raise your hand and we will call on you, that would be great. And in the meantime, great. Carolyn, I see that you've got your hand up. You want to go ahead and ask a question?
Yes, I had a question for Jeff. You had mentioned on your trip to San Francisco, you always needed a backup, or in your mind, a backup charging station. And I wasn't quite sure what you meant by having a backup charging station. Was it?
Sure. I can answer that. No, I mean, again, there are lots of chargers around. The specific example, when we were on a road trip, for instance, the first charging that we were planning on going from Olympia to Albany, Oregon. And we got to Albany, Oregon, and the charger that we were planning on going to was out of order. So at that point, we only had about 20 miles of range left. But luckily, there were other chargers not too far away. So it's just, you don't want to, so you just want to have some backup. But in general, as I mentioned, and as other people have mentioned, there are lots of chargers out there. And again, they're being added all the time. I noticed, I was over at the over in Lacey by the Target over there, and they're adding, I think they're Tesla chargers, but still, there are chargers now down at the Olympia Farmers Market. There are chargers really all over. And so, so that was my point. Just, you don't want to head off into an area where there's only one charger, and then if that one charger is out of order, then you're kind of stuck.
Got it. Got it. I also want to thank the Department of Ecology because I charge my car there all the time, and I couldn't exist without it because I live in a building and there's no charger here. So I'm relying on a neighbor and the Department of Ecology. So thank you.
Well, that's really creative charging there, Carolyn. That's awesome. I did see there was a question about being able to charge in the street. Does anybody have a good answer for that? Is it like anybody have experience with charging when you don't have off-street parking? We may need to do.
No.
Go ahead, Thad.
Well, I ended up charging our car down the street at a friend's garage. But I did have a conversation with the city of Olympia. Apparently in Olympia, you can put a charger into the right of way, provided you're willing to let other people charge too. So that's kind of a, I don't think that many of my neighbors would actually plug into the charger I had in front of my house if I did that. But that is a possible thing to think about.
Great, thanks. Yeah, we can maybe look into that some more too and see if there are other folks who've had to do that. Phyllis, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I was going to ask, people reference like the charging stations at Ecology and all, you know, is there a charge to use those charging stations? And if they're free, like what was just mentioned earlier, how long does it take to charge your vehicle? I mean, how long can you park there?
Do you want me to weigh in on that?
Sure.
First of all, it is free. And it's 24/7 open. So I can go at any time I want and I can stay as long as I want. That's been my experience. For me, I get about 20 miles charge per, I think it is per hour. I have a Chevy 2018 Bolt. It's all electric. So that will give you some idea. And when I'm there, I can go across the street and shop, you know, do some, because there's, you know, that's another thing you need to think about when you choose a charger is, are there things to do during charging? And other than sitting in your car and reading a book, you know? So that is a perfect location to charge free.
And my understanding is that not all chargers are created equal either, right? And so there are some that charge really fast and there are some that charge slower. And then there are some that work for Teslas and some that don't. Does anybody want to just talk a little bit about that? Sounds like maybe Chris and Cleve, you want to talk about that?
I can give it a quick try.
Okay, feel free to add on other panelists.
Sure. There's a variety out there. I think it's pretty common for a lot of public charging stations. If you find the ones over by Capitol Mall, I live here in Lacey. There's a free charging station right across from Lacey City Hall. Those are 220 systems. And it's like Carolyn says, expect you're going to get 20 or 22 miles of range per hour of charging on those. There's also what are called these direct current high-speed charging stations. And Jeff, you might be able to comment on that.
Sure. So yeah, there are what are called level 3 chargers, which are the DC, the fast chargers. And obviously when you're doing a road trip, I mean, so as has been mentioned, if you've got a car with a good sized battery, like Cleve's, like the Nero or the Bolt, I mean, that's going to take overnight, essentially 8 or 9 hours to fully charge. If you're doing a road trip, that's not really feasible if you want to. So when we drove to the Bay Area, we of course were looking for fast chargers, and that will charge your battery in anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half or so. Again, there can be some variation on those as well, but so that can also be harder on the battery. So they say that when you don't want to do only fast charging. So sometimes that's you have to do that, but the level 2 chargers or level 1 chargers are better, are better for the longevity of the battery.
Is there a charge?
Yes, I mean, so it varies. I mean, some chargers are free. The chargers over at the Capitol Mall, last time I was over there, they were free. There are different charging networks. A common one is the ChargePoint network. And so when we drove to San Francisco, the average charge, the fast charge to go from say 10% charge to up to 80 or 90% was about $10. And again, that would us again, about 200 miles or so. But there's one network, there's what's called the Electrify America network that actually we had to pay almost $50 for a charge. So after that, we started avoiding that network. But so, yeah, I mean, it is, but again, there are apps. So there's a lot of apps, you know, there's apps for the ChargePoint that tells you where they're at, where their charging stations are, but there's also apps that tell you, that look at all different charging networks and tell you where their charging networks are. So there's a lot of tools out there, as I said.
Great. Anybody else want to add on to that? Samara, you got? Oh, I thought you had your hand up, Samara.
Oh, I have a question, but I don't know if we're done talking with this topic.
I have something to add about the chargers just because of my experience. And I was in Portland and I hadn't set up an account for any charger, and you can't just charge. You have to have an account. So you even have to call in and, you know, give them your credit card, and you have to do all that in advance. It's not like you can put a credit card in the charger or anything like that. I was really naive about that. So it's a little bit more planning.
I've had experience with chargers in various places, and that charge. And you're right, you have to give them your credit card number and have to set up some account beforehand. Except I found one, I think it was in Poulsbo, that you just give them your number and they just charge it that way. The ones that are commonly known are by City Hall. That one I've charged there, and that cost me about $7 after about 3 hours, something like that. I've charged at SeaTac. And that's good because I've got a Leaf that gets 100 miles, and I think I had about 30 at the time. And so I just pulled into their cell phone lot and could charge there. And it was about $10 to fill up. So.
Great. Go ahead, Samara. What was your question?
Yeah, I was wondering if any of you all had read anything, or if there's any research out there about for example, when people were explaining that this takes less maintenance, like less trips to the mechanic shop and all that, like that sounds really great. But I wonder about like jobs and like folks, a lot of the folks sometimes who run mechanic shops tend to be, you know, like lower income people. So I wonder if there'd be like a big displacement of jobs there, or if there's like opportunities of jobs that we're not aware of with the shift to electrical vehicles. Does that question make sense?
Pat, you got something to say about that?
Well, just that it will be the electric cars. When more and more people get electric cars, there will be fewer need for repairs. And so we have to prepare for that and help people get into other jobs. But I think it's going to take a little while for that to happen. But working on gas cars is kind of not a good plan for a young person to think about doing.
I know Braun from Braun's Auto, and he's getting out of the business, and he's doing it because electric is going to be the future, and there's not going to be enough money in just carriages and wheels, which is really, I mean, those things are the same things. Shock absorbers and suspension, those things have to be worked on. Although I've driven cars that really had no shock absorbers or suspension, but yeah, you have to work on those. But I do know that Braun is getting out of the business. So.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to bring up, Samara. I mean, it is, you know, there are not every aspect of going electric is going to be great for everyone, right? So it's good to point out that there will be some displacement probably going on. Do other folks have thoughts on that?
I just think there are going to be a lot of big, slow transformations in the economy. There are going to be fewer jobs for mechanics and more jobs for solar installers and wind mechanic people. And there are going to be a lot of different changes.
Go ahead, Matthew.
And I know the dealer that I got my car from, because it was purchased used. Mine was actually the lease return from one of their mechanics that worked on the electric vehicles. So that particular dealer had two mechanics that's only focus was their electric vehicles. And I don't know if that was in place of 4 other mechanics or how that worked, but they did have a dedicated staff of 2 people just to focus on that. So I would imagine there's a new group of professionals coming in or technicians coming in to work on these things as well.
I'd have to second that for sure too. I mean, a lot of mechanics these days are getting all certified in all sorts of electronics and computers and all that, and the cars still have that. They have those kind of subsystems. So there's definitely going to be work there to work on the cars, just a little different focus. Not pulling an engine out or pulling a head off, but maybe replacing a drive motor, a complete unit, or going in and working on the screen inside the car, which they all have. So those kind of things.
I think that might be a good lead into, somebody had asked in the chat, what is involved in a software update? So what does that look like when you take your car into the mechanic and they do a software update?
Yeah, I don't have any personal experience. I know the Teslas do it over the air. You connect your car up to Wi-Fi and they'll do it over the air and you don't have to do anything with it at all. The Chevy Bolt that we have, apparently it can get updated, but GM just doesn't do that. They'll want you to come in and they'll hook up their computers to the car and do an update that way, if they even do. I think they still have an old model, thought process of bring the car in and we'll do something to it if it needs to be done. They're not very proactive like Tesla is, where they're pushing out updates all the time.
So I can comment on that with the Kona. We needed, as about a month ago, got a notification via my Hyundai app saying that the car needed an update. And so I took it into the dealer. They had it for a pretty short period of time and updated the software. So I didn't watch them. I don't know exactly what they did, but probably just as Tom said, plugged it in somewhere and did the software update, and that's all it took.
That mysterious thing that happens to our phones every once in a while, software update. Ooh, it's all different now. Carolyn, looks like you have another question.
Yeah, I have a question. Has anyone had experience with roadside service in terms of electric cars? Like, for instance, if you were to run out of electricity, does roadside service plug you in? Do you know it's a question? I haven't had that experience.
I haven't had that experience, but I've been reading a lot about it, and I believe it or not, they're coming up with some portable charging stations. There's these mega battery packs that the tow drivers can take around with them, and they can get you like maybe 10 miles or 15 miles if they plug you in. But they're just coming onto the market now, and they're still quite expensive. But the technology's coming, so I can definitely see that coming. But I've never had any experience with that, or haven't heard of anybody that's had that.
That you called it a mega battery pack?
Yeah, it's basically it's like your battery pack in your car, except it's smaller.
Yeah,
it's the same kind of thing. It has a lot of power in it, and it's enough to at least get you like 10 miles.
That's really a good backup safety measure that would take a road, yeah, I think that would really help me if I had one of those in the car. But actually, I'm to the point knowing how much I drive and how many miles it's going to take. I actually will never go back to a gas car. It took me 6 months to get adjusted to this because of all the charging and all of what we're talking about. But once that 6 months was over, I won't ever go back to a gas car.
Susie, did you have something to add to that? And then I see Lynn has her hand up.
Yeah, just real quickly. When I bought my Nissan Leaf, they gave me a phone number and a card. And it's a 24/7 service so that if I ever run out on the road, you know, get stranded, I call the number and they come and charge it. And as far as I know, it's for as long as I own the car. I mean, so
That's awesome.
those services exist, and the Nissan people are providing that. So
Yeah, it's interesting because it is like this fear I feel like that people have, and the battery's gonna run out, the battery's gonna run out, but well, sometimes you run out of gas in your car too, right? So it does, these things can happen.
yeah.
Lynn, did you have a question? We can't hear you.
There, okay. I've heard from some of your wonderful panelists that some dealers are not really motivated to sell EVs because they make their money off of people bringing cars in for repairs. And of course, as we were just discussing, there aren't so many of those. So what is people's advice for how to, you know, locate a car if the EV sales, if the salespeople are not, you know, going to be really motivated about helping you find one? And clearly there's lots of different ones out there now. And so how to kind of navigate through the selection process.
There are several useful websites with a lot of information that sort of let you compare the features of these various cars. Maybe I can paste some stuff into the chat box if people are interested.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Thad. And any panelists have anything to add about that? There was a question too for Jeff about buying a car in Oregon and how that worked for paying state taxes and things like that. So I don't know if there's folks have thoughts on that, but it does seem like there's something that has come up a lot in our transportation action group, is this idea that, yeah, there's not a lot of incentive for the people selling the cars to sell EVs.
Yeah, I mean,
do you have something to add on that?
Did you want me to add to comment on that, Carrie?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, so yeah, the Kona we bought in Oregon because it wasn't, we bought it again in October of 2019, October of last year, and wasn't available for sale in Washington. So we went to Oregon to buy it. It turns out that the Beaverton Hyundai, where we got it, they sell actually a fair number of cars to people in Washington who want the cars that are available in Oregon, but not yet in Washington. And so we were able to, just through the dealer, to register it in Washington. They charged the sales tax. As it turns out, it was complicated because they overcharged us. We had to work to get a refund on some of that sales tax that they overcharged us because of the tax rebate. But now, luckily, Hyundai of Seattle is selling the Konas, and so you don't necessarily have to go to Oregon to get them. But luckily, I mean, Washington, I think these cars are going to be more available here in coming years. It's probably going to take a year or two, but we're now what's known as a zero emission vehicle state. So there's going to be, slowly but surely, the incentives will be there to require these manufacturers to be selling these vehicles in Washington. So. But I've certainly been frustrated with our local Hyundai dealer. They don't seem very interested in selling EVs or really talking about or servicing EVs. So.
Great. And I also, you know, we, in our transportation action group, we've been talking a lot about this quite a bit. And one of our members of that group recently went out and bought her first electric vehicle, Ann Mills, who is here. And I think my guess is that, you know, and if you wanted to say anything about it, you sure can, but that talking to all these other people who already own EVs was really helpful for when it was time to go and buy the car, right? Because maybe the salespeople aren't really that helpful. So knowing that when you go in, I think would be a big help, and talking to other people who own EVs in advance.
Yeah, that's how I joined the transportation group, was just to learn more. And it's just been really helpful, this kind of thing, listening to other people and their experiences and their advice and so on. And so I really had my eyes wide open, and I saw really good, you know, most of the good deals were some other state across the country. And I saw a good deal. It was right here in, you know, in the county. So or almost. So yeah, it's really helpful to talk to a lot of other people.
Awesome. Pat, go ahead.
Oh, I noticed in the chat that somebody wanted to know how electric vehicles pay for the highways, for highway maintenance. And this last year when I paid my car tabs, and somebody else, I think it was Jeff or somebody, also noticed that it's like, I think 100, it's like $225 more for a car tab for an electric vehicle. And at this point, it's not by the mile. I think we should tell them to, charge by the mile how much you use the roads, because I use the roads so little, less than 5,000 miles a year, that that car tab price at $225 is quite high for me, because when you add in insurance plus the car tabs, I pay hardly anything to run the car, but it costs quite a bit to have the insurance, to have the, that car tab, which is about $225 apparently. And I don't think it varies by car.
Yeah,
But
that's great info. So when you're paying your car tab, you're essentially paying the tax that you would be paying if you were buying gas, except for you pay it in a lump sum, and it doesn't matter how much you drive.
That's right. And it's not, when you buy gas, you pay a certain amount of tax per gallon of gas. But for the car tabs, it's just a one size fits all. And I don't think that's quite fair for an older person that doesn't drive very much.
Right. Totally. Maybe we can do something about that.
Yes. Because it would be an easy thing to change.
Yeah, Jim Lazar, let me jump in for just a second on this issue. We also, as electric vehicle drivers, pay a general government tax on our electricity. In Olympia, we pay 13% tax, 4% state and 9% city. That goes to, pay for police and parks and sidewalks. But gasoline drivers don't pay any general government tax. So we're actually being kind of double charged we pay for road use through the vehicle registration fee, and you're paying for 20,000 miles a year whether you use it or not. So it's a terrible deal for Pat and a great deal for an Uber driver who drives 40,000 miles a year. But we also pay a general government tax that gasoline vehicles don't pay. So we're being double taxed.
All right, well, good to hear. Not good to hear, but no. David has a question, and then I'd like to ask a question of everyone before it gets too late too.
Great, well, thank you, Carrie, for getting this put together. And I'm a board member for TCAT. I have a couple questions just related to the action team in terms of what your plans are to get to that, I guess, next step to help with the climate mitigation plan. Are you guys going to do like outreach type stuff, more show and tell, or more hands-on show and tell? And just relative to, I think, some of the content that you're beginning to develop, to dispel some of the myths that a lot of the panelists have talked about, which was really good to hear. Is that something that people or you are planning, or is the group planning to do? Because I think that's, there's still a lot of that hesitation from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. And we don't have our next, time frame planned out yet. Our next meeting is this Friday, and our plan for that meeting is to look at this, what we did tonight, and look at what our capacity as a group is, and really start planning on what we want to do next. And so here's another invitation. If anybody does want to be a part of that group, send me an email and I will send you the invite for that, because you can help to help us to guide the way that this group is going. And I think that we will want to do more outreach. I think that's something that is definitely something we're going to want to be doing. My question actually was going, and I'll let you get to your next question as well, David, but I wanted to ask everybody if they had ideas for other webinars that we might do on EVs and transportation. And if so, like what would you be interested in learning about? What could we put together? So kind of love to throw that question back to the audience here. And if there is something that you think would be interesting, you can say it out loud, but you could also put it in the chat box as well so that we have that written log of that as well. So I'll ask you all to do that if you have any ideas. And David, did you have another question as well?
So I know that there were, well, I didn't really have a lot of questions, but I think a lot of the panelists did speak to some of those questions. Just right down the road from my home, somebody's got their Tesla Model 3 on the side of the road and they have an extension cord charging it. So, the reality is there are factors in terms of your behavior, in terms of how you drive and how much you really need to charge. So I think you need to weigh a lot of that stuff. And I think there was also one just relative to actually a few questions on just the different plug types. I know you can get different plug types and adapters so that you can charge at any station. And I think Tesla is also looking at incorporating that aspect into their super network or their supercharging network that enables, I think it's a specific type of charger that allow newer EVs to charge. But I don't know what their plans are just relative to the business model and how much they're going to charge other electric vehicles to charge at their or within their network. So there's a lot of innovation going on right now from my perspective. I'm also looking at an EV as well. So thumbs up, keep it going, man. This is good stuff.
Awesome, great, thank you. I thought I saw somebody's hand. Robert, did you have your hand up? And if I've missed anybody's hands up, I apologize. I can't see everybody at one time, so.
If I could say something, yeah, Carrie.
Robert is about to talk, I think. Could you hold on for a minute, Ed?
Yeah.
Thanks. I put some comments about some of the downsides of electricity if we don't know where it's coming from. And I think what would be important is to, for electric vehicles to actually be effective in reducing climate change significantly, the energy's got to come from good sources. So I'd be interested in knowing for people who are considering buying them, how they will know, like, is there better chargers to go to than others, or what kind of things can you do to actually reduce your footprint more than our electric companies are doing in general? I mean, they're getting towards lower coal power, for example, but we still got a long ways to go. The electricity that we're putting in electric cars is not always green. And if you haven't seen the online movie Planet of the Humans, for a bit of devil's advocacy, I would suggest it. But in any case, there's got to be better and worse ways to do this. So what are the better ways? Yeah.
Thank you for that, Robert. Yeah, I totally agree that, hydro is not clean and clear. There are problems with that as well. I'll see if the panelists have any comments for that. I know Susie, for instance, has her own solar panels on her house. And so that's pretty awesome right there. I know we can't all afford to do that right away, but that's one option for sure. Go ahead, Chris.
One thing I just wanted to mention was at Department of Ecology, we talk about point source versus non-point source pollution. And whatever the electrical source is, it's more regulated than individual vehicles. And you have a lot of non-point source vehicles that are all over the place, putting out pollution everywhere by the roadside and by a lot of people's houses, and especially for vehicles that aren't maintained. And a point source is always going to be better with our current pattern of regulation. So, but we still do need to move to greener sources of electricity. But that's just something to think about. And also as a cyclist, when I am riding on the road and these vehicles pass by, I can't breathe. I think about that too. Electric cars, it's nothing. So, and it affects a lot more people over a wider area with non-point source pollution. Or point source or non-point source. It's late.
Totally. It is late. Did anyone else have something to add to that? All right. And Ed had something to say. Go ahead, Ed.
I just wanted to say this is really an exciting time to be in. I mean, with COVID and all the rest of it, it's a very weird time to be in. But as far as electric vehicles go, we're seeing a revolution for the electric motor over the ICE, and it's happening right around us. And it's every day. You can look online every day. There's something new. I saw something today about Volkswagen inventing a new battery. So there's always something happening. Rivian, which is making a pickup truck, is working with Ford to make their pickup trucks, and they will have on those pickup trucks a charger that they can, somebody over the side of the road, they can charge their electric vehicle. So it's really exciting. I mean, it reminds me of my father, who was an aviation nut, and when he was young, and aviation was new. And it just reminds me of that kind of thing. Very exciting.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Well, it's about 8:30 now, so I think it's time for us to wrap up. I know there's a lot of great information in that chat box there, and somebody mentioned that you can actually save that yourself. So if there's information you want, I saw that they had it written there. It was like, I don't know what the instructions are for it though.
Well, it's very easy. You just go to that 3-dot menu in the chat box and click on it. And it says save chat. You have to click on that and you'll wonder where it goes. It will go on your desktop when you leave the meeting. And then if it will go to your, not download, your, I can't think of it.
Documents?
Your documents folder.
Great.
Zoom puts a file into your documents folder.
That's great. And you could probably, if that's not working for you, you could probably copy and paste it as well. And I will have this all saved as well. So if you aren't able to get the information, you can email me. My email is in that chat box. It's also in the email you received with your registration. So it's carrie@thurstonclimateaction.org. Let's all unmute and give our panelists a big old round of applause, huh? Make a little noise. Hey, thank you. Thank you all so much for sharing your experience and helping us to get a little bit closer to getting our own EVs if we don't already.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
And if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me or one of the other panelists as well if you happen to know.